You know when you're ready.
Okay, we're live. We're live.
Okay, does anyone want to give the opening prayer and share a spiritual thought? Me too. Here it is. Dear Heavenly Father, looking to boost our education. We're grateful for the opportunity of BYU Idaho, and we're grateful for the teachers who take the time to work with us. We ask for thy spirit to be with us, that our minds will be opened and we'll have greater understanding of the concepts presented to us today. We say these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So for a spiritual thought, I have a 16-year-old teenager who is and has walked away from the church and all of his responsibilities. And I've just started the Book of Mormon again, and I was really focused on when we talk about the iron rod. And I've realized that, most of us, when we are holding on to the iron rod, we're looking elsewhere. We may not be focused on the tree of life, but we still have our hand on the rod. And I really do believe that is enough. It doesn't perhaps help us progress as quickly and without being unscathed, but we still have that foundation, and it's still something we're still choosing. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this with my son, because he's let go of the rod, but I recently, through prayer, have realized that he hasn't let go of the rod. He's just faced in a different way while he's still holding on to it, which has actually just brought me a lot of comfort. And I'm grateful for it. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So what grade would you give Morgan for how he pursued Skyhook, and why?
I give him an A+. I like that he took his family and moved him somewhere where he could afford, and then he went and got assistance. And then even though the Child Protective Services contacted him, that he still continued with the business because he saw it was going to eventually pan out for them. Yeah, so I feel like if I take that advice to heart, it'll take me somewhere, and I don't know where, but I think I'd want to find out. So A+. Yeah.
I was pretty impressed myself. The outcome is not as great as, based on where they are in the case study, but I agree. He was frugal, which won him points with investors. And he hired the right people for the right job.
Yeah, I agree. As he's pushed forward with it, and he's really in a tough spot. He has a wonderful business idea, but both of the back end channels are kind of loosey-goosey on him, both on the application side and on the hardware side are both kind of loosey-goosey. They both want each other. Hardware wants applications, and applications wants hardware. And his is the idea that bridges the gap between them. So it's been difficult because of that. But the way he's pursued it, I think has been wise. Been frugal,
Yeah, I think, and that takes us into number 4. Is it a good technology? I mean, it's gotten, of course, lots of feedback, but I think the issue we run into is that it's not different enough to really warrant a lot of excitement, because they've already got the GPS positioning in Google. So is there enough on here to really justify? I mean, it feels like a little bell and whistle, not necessarily a foundational company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see. That's where I got confused. I didn't know. I was thrown off. I thought Google was Skyhook, but that they just changed the name. So that's not probably what it was.
Google, on a massive scale, has taken pictures of every address in the country, every street. And so that was one of the things that they ran into an issue with Skyhook. But it does give a little bit better information as far access in some areas, and there is, of course, the location aspects of it, real time. But I just didn't feel like it was exceptional enough I guess I felt it was mediocre enough to justify where they were at.
Yeah, my thought on the tech of it, which led to the lack of sales, I think it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't that much different than what other people had. And I think it's not as usable as an actual, the actual GPS uses of it. I mean, it works really good. It would work really good in the places with lots of Wi-Fi link ups. But like in a town like mine, it wouldn't work at all. There's not enough Wi-Fi links to provide that location service.
That's a good point. Well, so then when we look at the lack of sales, of course, we've got those issues, but it also appeared to me that they had a lot of issues with how it is that they manage the presentation process. It seemed to me like they needed to go in and address the check writer and then follow up with the tech people, because too often they went into the tech people, and at the end of the day, those are apples and oranges. They don't rub elbows together, and I've never felt like they've worked well together. Marketing seems to be the liaison between the two groups. So I think that was also another reason they had a lack of sales, is because they weren't dealing with the right people.
I'd agree with that. And because it requires so much investment and so much upfront work, the reason Google's been able to do it is because Google's such a massive company that it can afford the infrastructure and to put in that cost. These guys can't. And so they don't have anything to sell. They're selling an idea with they make a prototype to go to a meeting with someone, and it works in their meeting, but they say, okay, will this work tomorrow here? And they have to say, no, it won't.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And because they don't have an actual product to present, it makes it harder to sell it to anybody, because it's an idea, not a product.
Well, it's a pretty good idea, right? Because they've already got like 1.8 million in the A series, and then they've gotten all the way, they've gotten B and C. So like, I just didn't see, they only had 2 people on the sales team. So I didn't really see, the only thing I saw about the revenue was that it was very little. But like you guys are saying, good technology, but like no revenue. So I don't, like I said, I was lost when I thought it was Google, Skyhook, I thought it was.
All right, so review the deals below. This is number 5, and describe the proposed deal, outcome, and lessons learned. Well, Microsoft looked pretty promising. Microsoft's on page 6.
Yeah.
5 and 6. It's at the bottom of 5, I think. Or is it 5? 6. But again, they ran into a problem of selling it. So of course they thought that things went really well with Microsoft. They'd pay an upfront fee of $300,000, and an additional fee for every copy of Streets and Trips that shipped with the technology. So for every upgrade. But I think that somewhere, I mean, they were clearly excited about it. They wrote the proposal up, but then what ended up happening? That they closed. I mean, so since we don't know what really happened, it's hard to identify what lesson needed to be learned there. Because they made a proposal they thought was fair. It was agreed to by Microsoft. Microsoft sent them the contract, but then once it was signed, never signed it themselves. So, what is that lesson?
I took it. I thought I saw that. What I learned from that, I learned that names could be your best friend, and because they started throwing the Microsoft name around, and they picked up funding. So that was the only thing that I saw that I learned from that.
It did help close out that the Series A. I don't know. It is a tricky spot with Microsoft. I thought that was kind of odd the way that Microsoft had agreed, sent the contract, and then pushed out the back of it at the very end. That was kind of weird, but certainly unfortunate.
And it appears as though they never got the feedback necessary to verify what had happened. On 9/11, where is that? Was that in here?
9/11, let me find it.
Oh, that was the 911 where they're having positioning for their vehicles.
Yeah, with the yes.
Yeah, and then but like the VCs didn't like it because they didn't see it was a repeat idea. Like, what does that mean? That they didn't want to? The VCs didn't want to give them more money.
Well, the VCs are having a hard time that it's not. There's just a one-time thing. If they make money once on the sell, but you don't make money. They're not coming back and getting more and more and more. Well, that was with taxi cabs and Lockheed Martin. This is the 911 was with the Federal Communications Commission, trying to use GPS on emergency vehicles.
Right. Right. All right, and then when we look at Nokia, I think the lesson that we learned there is that, well, so the proposal is that, let me see where Nokia was at. That was the $30 per device that they would get. That's on page 10. So their stumbling point with Nokia was that Skyhook wanted to be paid for the service. There were two issues on that. One, Nokia had just spent $8 billion in acquiring Navtech, and they felt like they could recreate that through Navtech. And the other issue was that they wanted to get paid for it. You know, Google does the GPS, but they didn't charge for the services. So that, I think, was a big issue on that outcome, why it didn't come to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Who benefits from the technology? What problem does it solve? Who has this problem? Does the business decision makers in the company have the feel the pain, the solution? So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, it solves a problem in giving real time, and it can get into areas, but it also doesn't do remote areas. So it solves a problem, but I don't know it solves it enough.
I love you.
Yeah, I mean, it solves the problem of getting the areas. And it's real time. You don't have to wait for the satellites to come around. And that, I mean, that it helps solve that problem, but only for certain individuals in certain locations. And only does it work if those phones don't have their Wi-Fi services enabled.
Then they have to go back to GPS.
Exactly. So then it doesn't work. So if your phone is not off, if you have your Wi-Fi turned off and you're operating on data, then it doesn't work. It's just
so, like, are we currently using this technology right now, like in our phones, like the iPhones?
I don't think so. I think it's mostly gone to GPS. Microsoft and Apple, everyone launched additional satellites.
So, like, at the end, when they said they were trying to talk with Steve Jobs, it never fell through.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
I didn't.
But eventually, most of the tech companies solved this problem by putting more satellites in the air. So that you.
I remember this company. I don't know if they ever. They sold. They sold to another company just a year ago, I think, maybe 2 years ago. This was relatively new in the news. So I don't know whatever happened with the Apple thing, but it's not a name that we know. So I think everyone wanted to control. In fact, if you take a look at, well, let's just go to the next number 7. So vote. Which strategy do you favor? Which do you think is the best idea?
I
See?
I said they could sell great.
But the problem is that then they don't, you know, he's always wanted
they'd switch
his own
names.
company. And I feel like selling the company, because really they're not selling the company, they're selling the patents, because there really is no company, right?
Yeah,
right.
Just not selling anything.
We had a valuation of 38 million was what the last valuation I saw based on the Series C. I mean, so the most they're going to get for it is 38 million, the most.
So when I consider that, I realize that.
And when you think about the fact that they've been through, you know, 4, even 5 funding rounds, like Friends and Family, the Angel, and then the Series A, B, and C, they're not going to end up with that much money. They might get, you know, 5, 8 million. And I think it's something that because they own the patents, they could always do. That's like my last case.
I had some.
What's persevering is that because they don't have any revenue, getting a Series D round is going to be very difficult.
Yes, very.
So I went with local ads for my. If they could set it up in a
I really broke it. I broke it. I dropped it on the floor and shattered it.
then I think that they could show what they can do.
Okay.
And it would be more obvious. So this is what I came up with in my calculation. Oh, look at the baby!
Gotta get a treat.
I never see him when I'm sitting in my
Treat.
my thing up itself. Okay, so here are my calculations. So right here, if we went in Boston, a population of 673,000, 64% of them have an estimated 64% of Bostonians have smartphones. Okay, which brings us at 431,000 smartphones. At 65 cents a device, that's between 30 and $1, we're looking at 280,000 for that market per phone. Okay, and people only get, let's just say you're going to get that every 2 years because people usually have their phones for 2 years minimum, right?
Right.
Versus a data service, which the case study said would be not the case study, I had to go in and look, would be approximately $250 per customer. So put it in a device. We're looking at a 385% increase in revenue for the data. So the data is what matters that we get from communication services, you know, based on these numbers. Okay. And so when we come over here, take a look at, you know, in the US alone, 68% of Americans have phones, 59% have tablets, laptops, and desktops. Desktops are the least used right now. Which means these location services is big money. So when we go back and we look at, you know, current team skills, I think that they're losing. They're suffering in the sales department.
They think that all of a sudden now they're finally cut all they have.
They've got good resources here, but the business model they set up, I think, is what the problem is. It can't be about the service. It's got to be about the data.
Right.
That's a lot of information.
That was all I figured out.
So are we still thinking, all right, well, so let's look at how we're going to go for jobs. What does BANTA mean?
I have no idea what BATNA is.
BATNA, excuse me. Let me go back here.
BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Huh, all right.
So with your call with Steve Jobs, what's your best alternative if that doesn't work out? To use Apple. And what are Steve Jobs' interests? Why did he call you? Who should pay? Well, we can't pay. We don't have any money.
So I think his interest is because it's new, it's the latest. I think that's why he's there. I mean, as far as what our BATNA is, I think that mine would be doing local ads.
Okay.
And you're thinking that maybe selling the company might be it.
Well, the company can't. I think they're gonna have a really difficult time raising any more funds without more revenue. That's gonna be very difficult. And I don't know if they can continue persevering on a line of thought where they're not making any revenue. So they have to sell the company, and in my mind, they either had to sell the company and get out, or they have to go to local ads. But persevering and just trying to and operating on VC money isn't going to work anymore.
It's not.
I mean, if I was a VC, I wouldn't give money again.
Persevere wouldn't even go then. Because if I said that they should persevere, then I'm saying that they're actually going to make it right. That everyone's going to be using Skyhook one day, but I haven't ever heard of them, so I guess my idea is all wrong.
You know,
so which one of the three would be best be working? Christine's, the local ads, or sell the company? Because I don't even know what happened to it. And she said she's heard of it in the news.
I would try to do. They were acquired in 2014 is when they were finally acquired. I think local ads is probably a good route because if you can find that you're making money, then maybe you can get more VC funding.
Stay alive long enough to get it figured out. Because the thing is, you could always sell the company.
Yeah.
But I would take the local ads as a last-ditch effort to see what we could do. And I think that based on their selling, it would be
how would the local ads help out a software company? Just so that way I can have it click in my head. Do you know how? Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
One more time.
How would the local ads help that you're talking about? How are they going to help? If like they've already posted on Craigslist to hire.
What they're selling is this information right here. So based on this website right here, on location data, mobile searches, people use their mobile device for food and beverage. 72% of consumers use it to find a restaurant. So you can sell to research firms, marketing research firms, because in the marketing environment, information is king. They are always trying to figure out what the consumer is doing, because that then has them figuring out how they can analyze that data and turn it into dollars. So if we know that, right here, let's do entertainment is 42%. You can then go into an entertainment community and sell ad time for them locally, because you're telling them how the consumer behaves, and they will actually make their marketing based on how the consumer behaves. So, I mean, you'll notice now when you go to your smartphone, it always says mobile friendly. Remember how when you'd go into a website and you'd have to push everything around so that you could see the whole screen?
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen that.
This is a response based on this kind of data. We have huge amounts of, people are not using the desktop as much. They're on the go. And if they want to know where to go to eat, you want your company to be the first thing that comes up. Chinese in Cameron Park. My favorite restaurant always comes up.
Right.
So
that's a fair point.
This is what we're talking about with data. And because they know where they're at all the time, they know what areas. So, this was in the Boston area, 72% in Boston, and health, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it becomes so specialized that you pretty much can sell it higher because they don't have to work as hard for it, for the data.
All right.
which is why you can get $250 per device. Which is a huge difference, but you need the location services to get the data.
Right. That's a very good point.
So who should pay? Will you pay Apple to get onto their device, or will they pay you? And how much will you propose?
I'm not sure that they can pay Apple.
Well, but they could, once it gets up and going. I mean, so relatively in a short period of time, in 3 months, with the data rolling in 3 months, they could actually start paying for that.
Yeah, that's true.
But I do like the idea of doing it for free and keeping the patents and the Apple maintains its technology brand, and the company, I mean, with Google, and Apple has a good relationship with Google.
Cool down a little.
There's got to be, well, there may not be a whole lot of benefit to Apple. We don't definitely want to charge them for it.
If you're choosing to eat your pretzel,
that's fair, because the hard part about doing that to Apple is that they can turn to Google.
Yeah.
A bigger name in the game who's already ready and who's that said probably likely wasn't going to charge them.
But I would have to say, if we did Google's understanding of the technology and their size of their company, well, I'd think about selling the patents to Google if you're going to sell.
Yeah, if you're selling, that's the person to go to, because Google actually probably would be interested in it. It increases their value on their location services, which are already top of the game.
Yeah, this was back in 2008. So you said that they were acquired in 2014. They must have. So that was 6 years that they persevered. I wonder how they went through it.
They did. They did pretty good. It sounds like they did. I haven't looked into it in depth, but it sounds like Skyhook and Steve Jobs come to some kind of an agreement that keeps Skyhook floated and powered them and pointed them in the right direction. And then Skyhook ended up working in and jumping in with Samsung as well for their devices. Between those, it really held them up.
Steve Jobs has such a reputation for one of the questions in the prep asks, at what point should Ted walk away? I literally put that in there. At the time he doesn't make any money or Steve Jobs steals his soul.
That's a fair point.
I'm submitting that. Okay, does anyone have anything else they want to share, or should we wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up, I think.
All right. Here we go. All right. So we felt that Morgan did a great job in pursuing Skyhook. He managed the company well, frugally, and used funds wherever he could that were free. I think he talked about having $200 for their monthly phone bill. It was a cool technology that had lots of feedback, positive feedback. They won an award. But the lack of sales may have come from the fact that it just wasn't too different of a product to differentiate itself, and he couldn't close the deal. He was having a problem getting through the gaps on that. The deals below, Microsoft, we don't really know what happened there, but that was a proposal that was kept. They were at contract. E911 was for emergency services. That didn't have an outcome either. And Nokia felt like it had its own technology that it could mimic it, and the price was too high. The lessons that we learned there is that possibly that the company Skyhook just didn't really understand the market and thought perhaps their product was more than it actually was. Who benefits from the technology? And technology is basically benefits by data mining. overall. Individuals can locate their devices, but that's on a smaller scale. What solves the problem locating the devices is there. Who has this problem? Anyone who has a device, and it doesn't really solve enough of the pain to make it go larger. So we voted that we would look at selling the company. We'd look at doing local ads first to try to save the company, and then ultimately sell the company, which ideally we would probably look at Google to do so. The current team skills, I think that we think that Skyhill's had it. There were some issues with the sales department. They were doing well on resources. However, they were coming up to a Series D, which would have been a problem for them because they didn't have revenues, excuse me. And the business model on paper was pretty good, but they were having problems executing it in a way that generated revenue. So for our agenda, we decided that our BATNA would be worst case scenario would be to sell the product or do it ourselves in local ads. Jobs interest was probably based on its cutting edge, it's new, which is something that was very important to the brand of Apple. He called to take a look at what they could do for Apple. As far as who should pay, we determined that no one should pay, that Skyhook should give this technology for jobs, but then use the data mining, the data information to sell for ads for the actual income. And how big is this opportunity for Skyhook? Well, based on the millions of products that of devices that Apple sells globally, this would have sealed the deal for them, their success. Anything I missed, guys?
No.
Nope, I think it's good.
All right, let's close it down.